I never thought my own blood would spill because of my brother's hands. This house, once my sanctuary, had become a battlefield where family bonds meant nothing against greed. The moonlight streaming through the Spanish-style windows of our Malibu estate cast eerie shadows across the cold marble floor where I lay, blood trickling from my lips onto the crumpled will in my trembling hands. Above me stood Daniel, my older brother, his eyes blazing with a fury I had never seen before. Beside him, Sofia, his wife, watched with cruel satisfaction as if she were enjoying a show she had orchestrated herself. "Sign it, Adora." Daniel's voice cracked like a whip through the silence, "or I swear I'll break every bone in your body." His fist was clenched so tightly his knuckles had turned white. Sophia's lips curved into a twisted smile as she encouraged him. "Do it, Daniel. End this. The stubborn fool deserves what's coming." The irony wasn't lost on me. Growing up, this very house had been my refuge, filled with my father's gentle laughter and the warmth of what I believed was unconditional family love. Chief Elias Vance had built his real estate empire from nothing, creating not just wealth but a legacy he hoped would unite his children. I remembered countless evenings when he would walk with me through the garden, his weathered hands pointing out the architectural details he had personally overseen, telling me that this house wasn't just property but the heart of our family. "This will belong to someone who treasures it as a home, not as an asset," he would say, his arm around my shoulders as we watched the sunset paint the Pacific Ocean in brilliant oranges and purples. Even then, I had noticed how his eyes would grow distant when Daniel's name came up in conversation, how he would change the subject when my older brother's business dealings were mentioned. Daniel had always been different. As children, he demanded the most expensive toys, throwing tantrums that would echo through the house until he got his way. He would deliberately break my gifts on Christmas morning, claiming they were accidents while wearing that same cold smile I saw now. Our middle brother Michael, a public interest lawyer with a gentle soul, had often stepped between us, quietly protecting me from Daniel's increasingly cruel pranks as we grew older. The reading of Father's will 3 weeks ago had shattered the illusion of family unity I had desperately clung to. In the elegant law office downtown, Mr. Morton had delivered the shocking news that would change everything. Daniel inherited the companies, the business assets, the liquid capital that made up the bulk of Father's fortune. Michael received oversight of the charitable foundations and community projects that had been Father's passion, but the family estate, the sprawling Malibu mansion that had been our childhood home, along with its associated accounts and final decision-making power over other inherited assets, had been left to me. The silence in that mahogany-paneled room had been deafening. Daniel's face had transformed from confident expectation to disbelief, then to a rage so pure it seemed to radiate heat. "This is impossible," he had shouted, slamming his hand on the polished conference table. "A woman cannot inherit the family seat. This has to be fraud." Sofia had been quicker to collect herself, her voice dripping with false concern. "Your father must have been confused in his final days, Daniel. What manipulation did you use on the old man, Adora?" Her accusation hung in the air like poison, and I had felt my cheeks burn with shame and anger. Michael had immediately placed a protective hand on my shoulder, his lawyer's mind already working to shield me from the storm he could see brewing. But I had been too stunned to fully process what was happening. The weight of responsibility, the magnitude of what Father had entrusted to me, felt overwhelming. The weeks that followed had been a masterclass in psychological warfare. Daniel had initially tried charm, inviting me to expensive restaurants in Beverly Hills, speaking in honeyed tones about sibling bonds and family tradition. "You don't really need this house, Adora," he would say over wine that cost more than most people's monthly rent. "I could buy you a penthouse in Manhattan, a beach house in Hawaii. Just sign the house over to me. According to tradition, it belongs to the eldest son." But I had held firm, remembering Father's words, feeling the weight of his trust. "It's not about money or location, Daniel. Dad wanted me to have this house. It was his dying wish. I can't betray that." That refusal had been the moment Daniel's mask finally slipped completely. The pretense of brotherly affection vanished, replaced by a calculated cruelty that shocked me in its intensity. Sofia had joined the campaign with relish, organizing family gatherings where she would publicly humiliate me, questioning my capability to manage such valuable property, spreading rumors that I had taken advantage of Father's declining health. The harassment had escalated systematically. First came the broken windows, dismissed by police as random vandalism. Then the threatening letters, untraceable but clearly personal. "Return what doesn't belong to you, or you'll regret it," one had read, left on my pillow like a venomous snake. But nothing had prepared me for the night Daniel finally showed his true nature. I had been sleeping when the sound of shattering glass jolted me awake. Before I could fully orient myself, Daniel had burst into my bedroom with 2 large men I didn't recognize, his face contorted with rage that made him look like a stranger. The beating that followed was systematic and brutal. Daniel didn't just want to hurt me, he wanted to break me completely, to reduce me to a cowering victim who would sign away my inheritance just to make the pain stop. As his fists connected with my ribs, my face, my arms raised in futile defense, he had continued his verbal assault. "You ungrateful little bitch," he had snarled between blows. "Everything I've worked for, everything I deserve, and you think you can just take it because the old man lost his mind." Sofia had stood in the doorway, actually filming the assault on her phone, her laughter mixing with my cries of pain in a symphony of cruelty that would haunt my nightmares. But then Michael had appeared, his usually gentle demeanor transformed by protective fury. "Let her go, Daniel. What the hell are you doing?" The fight that ensued had been chaotic and desperate, furniture overturning, glass breaking, until the distant sound of sirens announced that Michael had been smart enough to call for help before entering the house. The police had arrested Daniel and Sofia, but I knew this was far from over. As I lay in Michael's arms, my body aching and my spirit nearly broken, I had made a decision that would define the rest of my life. I was done being a victim. The legal battle that followed had been just as brutal as the physical assault. Daniel and Sofia had hired expensive lawyers who painted me as a manipulative gold digger who had taken advantage of a grieving, confused old man. They presented fabricated evidence and paid witnesses to testify to my supposed greed and manipulation. But Michael had been thorough in his counter-investigation. As my attorney and brother, he had uncovered a web of illegal activities that Daniel had been hiding for years. Tax evasion, fraudulent business practices, embezzlement from charity funds that father had entrusted to him. Most shocking of all, Michael had discovered that Daniel had been maintaining a secret family overseas, using company money to support his illegitimate children while presenting himself as a devoted husband to Sofia. Each revelation had been like a dagger to whatever remained of my illusions about my brother. Father had known, I realized. The distance in his eyes, the careful way he had structured his will, the trust he had placed in me rather than his eldest sonnet, had all been intentional. He had been trying to protect what remained of his legacy from Daniel's corruption. The court case had exposed Daniel's true nature to the world, but it had also made me a target. Released on bail pending trial, he had hired professionals to eliminate the sister who had destroyed his carefully constructed life. The car accident on the winding Malibu Canyon road had been too convenient, too precisely timed to be random. Only my father's insistence that I learn defensive driving had saved my life when the other vehicle had tried to force me over the cliff. That night, bleeding and shaken but alive, I had finally understood that defense wasn't enough. Daniel wanted to erase me from existence, to reclaim what he saw as his birthright. If I wanted to survive, I would have to fight back with the same ruthlessness he had shown me. The transformation hadn't happened overnight. With Michael's help and the assistance of a private investigator he trusted, I had begun to systematically dismantle everything Daniel had built. I used my architectural knowledge to identify structural problems and code violations in his development projects, anonymously reporting them to city officials. I leaked information about his financial irregularities to business journalists. Most satisfying of all, I had ensured that Sofia discovered the truth about Daniel's secret family and hidden assets. The satisfaction I felt as I watched Daniel's empire crumble piece by piece was both exhilarating and troubling. I was no longer the naive young woman who had believed in the inherent goodness of family bonds. I had become someone capable of calculation, of strategic thinking, of ruthless execution. In the glow of my computer screen late at night, manipulating financial records and social connections, I sometimes wondered if I was becoming too much like the brother I was fighting. But then I would remember the taste of my own blood on that marble floor, the sound of Sofia's laughter as she filmed my humiliation, and my resolve would harden again. This wasn't about justice anymore. This was about survival, about ensuring that Daniel could never again hurt someone the way he had hurt me. The end, when it came, was swifter than I had expected. Sofia's greed and wounded pride had accelerated Daniel's downfall beyond what I could have orchestrated alone. Her divorce filing had exposed hidden assets and triggered investigations by multiple government agencies. Business partners had fled like rats from a sinking ship. Banks had called in loans. Within 6 months, Daniel had lost everything. His companies, his reputation, his marriage, his freedom. The final confrontation had taken place at the gates of the estate, the very house that had started this war between us. Daniel had looked haggard, his expensive suits replaced by ill-fitting clothes, his confident demeanor shattered by months of legal troubles and financial ruin. Through the reinforced security fence I had installed, he had made his last desperate plea. "You destroyed everything, Adora," he had said, his voice hoarse with exhaustion and defeat. "Our family, our name, everything Dad built, but I had felt no sympathy for the man who had once tried to beat me into submission." "You destroyed yourself, Daniel," I had replied, my voice steady and clear. "I just helped you see the consequences of your choices. This house is the heart of our family, and you were never worthy of it." As I watched him walk away, shoulders slumped in defeat, I had felt not triumph but a profound sadness for what we might have been. The brother who had protected me from playground bullies when we were children, who had taught me to ride a bicycle in this very driveway, had become a stranger capable of violence and cruelty I couldn't have imagined. But I had survived. More than that, I had thrived. The house that had been a battlefield became a home again, renovated with my own architectural vision while preserving the elements that had made it special to Father. I had established a charitable foundation in his memory, using part of my inheritance to help families in crisis, ensuring that his legacy would be one of compassion rather than conflict. Standing on the balcony that overlooked the Pacific, watching the sunset paint the sky in the same brilliant colors I remembered from childhood, I reflected on the person I had become. The scared, naive young woman who had once believed that family bonds were sacred and unbreakable was gone, replaced by someone stronger, more self-aware, more capable of protecting herself and others. Michael joined me in these quiet moments, his presence a reminder that not all family relationships were built on exploitation and manipulation. "Dad would be proud of you," he would say, and I believed him. Not just because I had saved the house, but because I had found the strength to save myself. The scars remained, both physical and emotional. Sometimes I would catch myself checking locks twice, or feeling my pulse quicken when I heard unexpected footsteps. The trauma of betrayal by those who should have protected me had left marks that might never fully heal. But I had learned to live with those scars, to see them not as signs of weakness but as evidence of survival. The foundation work had become my new passion, helping other women who found themselves trapped in abusive relationships, whether with family members, partners, or friends. I understood their fear, their confusion, their desperate hope that love could somehow overcome cruelty. I also understood the strength required to walk away, to choose self-preservation over the comfort of familiar dysfunction. In helping others, I had found my own healing. Each woman who left an abusive situation, each family that received support to break cycles of violence and manipulation, felt like a small victory not just for them but for the frightened young woman I had once been. The house that had witnessed so much pain had become a sanctuary, not just for me but for others seeking refuge from the storms of their own lives. As I looked toward the future, I felt neither the bitter satisfaction of revenge nor the hollow emptiness I had feared might follow such a complete victory over my enemies. Instead, I felt something I hadn't experienced in years: peace. The kind of deep, abiding peace that comes from knowing you have the strength to protect what matters most, whether that's a house, a legacy, or simply your own right to exist without fear. Daniel was serving his sentence in a minimum security facility, his crimes finally catching up with him in ways that money and family connections couldn't prevent. Sofia had disappeared from Los Angeles entirely, presumably starting over somewhere else with whatever assets she had managed to secure in the divorce. I occasionally received updates on their situations through Michael's legal network, but they felt like reports from another world, another life that had only tangential connection to my current reality. The woman I had become was someone I was still learning to understand. She was harder than the girl who had grown up in this house, more suspicious of others' motives, quicker to recognize manipulation and exploitation. But she was also more compassionate toward genuine suffering, more determined to use her advantages to help those who hadn't been as fortunate in their battles against cruelty and injustice. Sometimes, in the early morning hours when the house was quiet and the ocean breeze carried the scent of jasmine through my bedroom windows, I would think about alternative histories. What if Father had divided his estate differently? What if Daniel had chosen to honor our father's wishes rather than challenge them? What if I had been willing to compromise, to give up the house in exchange for peace? But those thoughts never lingered long. The path that had led me here, painful as it had been, had also revealed truths about myself and my family that needed to be acknowledged. I had learned that blood relationships, no matter how close, didn't automatically confer the right to abuse and exploit. I had discovered that sometimes the most loving thing you can do for someone is to refuse to enable their destructive behavior, even when that refusal comes at great personal cost. Most importantly, I had learned that survival wasn't just about enduring cruelty, but about transforming it into strength, about using the lessons learned in darkness to create light for others. The house stood as a testament not just to Father's architectural vision but to the power of love over greed, of principles over convenience, of hope over despair. As I watched another sunset paint the sky in colors that seemed too beautiful for a world that contained so much cruelty, I felt grateful for the journey that had brought me to this moment. Not grateful for the pain, never that, but grateful for the strength it had revealed, the purpose it had clarified, the person it had helped me become. The war for my inheritance was over, but the work of building a life worthy of that inheritance continued every day. In helping others find their own strength, in preserving Father's true legacy of compassion and justice, in refusing to let bitterness poison the victory I had fought so hard to achieve, I was writing a new chapter in the story of this house and this family, and for the first time in years, I was genuinely excited to see how that story would unfold.